Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth's edge and watched the stars through the massive viewing window. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now, exploring systems that no human had ever seen before. Jake was tired but happy with their mission. They had discovered 12 new planets and made contact with 2 friendly alien trading posts. Lieutenant Casey Brooks sat at her communication station and suddenly jumped up from her chair. Her face went white as she stared at her screens. "Commander!" "Morrison, sir, I'm getting something strange here." Jake walked over to Casey's station and looked at the readings. The communication array was picking up signals from all across the galaxy. These were not normal trading messages or exploration reports. These signals were coming from the Galactic Council itself. "Put it on the main screen, Casey," Jake said. The viewing window changed and showed the face of an alien that Jake recognized from his training files. This was Speaker Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire. She was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Her people had been traveling between stars for over 50,000 years while humans were still living in caves. Veltar's usually calm face looked scared and desperate. Her large blue eyes were wide with fear, and her silver skin seemed to glow with worry. When she spoke, her voice shook in a way that Jake had never heard from any Galactic Council member before. "People of Earth, we send this message to you in our darkest hour. The Galactic Council formally requests military assistance from humanity. An ancient enemy has awakened from beyond the galactic rim. We call them the Devourers, and they are destroying everything in their path." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. The Galactic Council was asking humans for help. This was the same council that had put Earth under quarantine 300 years ago. They had said humans were too violent and dangerous to be trusted with advanced technology. They had called humans primitive warmongers who would bring chaos to the peaceful galaxy. Casey looked at Jake with surprise. "Sir, there are more messages coming in, dozens of them." The screen changed and showed different alien faces Jake recognized, some of them from his academy studies. There was High Admiral Kess of the Crystalline Hegemony. These beings were made of living crystal and could control pure energy with their minds. They had always looked down on humans as crude and backwards. "Our homeworlds are going dark," Admiral Kess said. His crystal body was cracked and dim. "The Devourers consume everything. Our energy shields mean nothing to them. Our weapons cannot stop them." Another face appeared. This was Mindspeaker Thren of the Telepathic Consortium. His people could read thoughts and share consciousness across vast distances. They had once called humans mentally inferior because humans could not speak with their minds. "The collective is breaking," Thren whispered. His 3 eyes were filled with terror. "The Devourers corrupt our thoughts. They turn our own minds against us. We can no longer maintain unity. Help us." More and more messages came through. The proud Mandorian warrior clans begged for aid. The Advanced Quantum Federation admitted their technology was useless. Even the ancient synthetic collective, beings made of pure logic and metal, sent pleas for help. Dr. Helen Pierce walked onto the bridge. She was the ship's expert on alien life and had studied every known species in the galaxy. "Commander, I've been listening to these messages in my lab. I've never seen anything like this. These species have been the masters of the galaxy for millions of years. They've never asked anyone for help, especially not humans." Chief Engineer Alex Carter joined them on the bridge. His face was serious as he looked at the alien messages. "Sir, I've been running analysis on their technical data. These Devourers are unlike anything we've ever encountered. They're not just conquering planets, they're eating them, converting all matter into more of themselves." Jake watched as more desperate pleas filled the screen. The Eternal Libraries, keepers of all galactic knowledge, reported their data archives being consumed. The Peaceful Gardens, a species that had not fought a war in 10,000 years, begged for weapons they did not know how to use. Casey turned to Jake with wide eyes. "Commander, I'm picking up destruction reports from across the galaxy. Entire star systems are going silent. The Devourers are moving fast and nothing is stopping them." Jake felt the weight of the moment. For 3 centuries, humans had been kept at the edge of galactic civilization. They were allowed to trade and explore, but never to join the council. The advanced species saw humans as children playing with dangerous toys. They feared human aggression and unpredictability. Dr. Pierce pulled up a holographic map of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where the Devourers had struck. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The enemy was moving in a coordinated wave, consuming everything in their path. "They're not just random destroyers," she said. "They're systematic. They learn from each world they take. They adapt to every defense the Council uses against them." Alex studied the technical reports. "The Council's usual tactics aren't working. Their energy weapons, their shields, their diplomatic solutions, none of it matters to these things. The Devourers just keep coming." Jake thought about Earth's history. Humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They had perfected the art of war in ways that peaceful species could not understand. While other races evolved beyond conflict, humans had continued to study violence and death. "Sir," Casey said quietly, "there's a direct message for you from Speaker Veltar." The screen changed again and Veltar's frightened face appeared. "Commander Morrison, we know your ship is the closest human vessel to Council space. We need you to carry our message to Earth. Tell your leaders that we are prepared to lift all restrictions on humanity. We will share our technology and welcome you as full members of the Council. We only ask one thing in return." Veltar paused and Jake could see shame in her alien eyes. "We need you to fight for us. We need human soldiers and human weapons. We need your people's talent for destruction. The galaxy that once feared your violence now begs for it." The message ended and the bridge fell silent. Jake looked at his crew and saw the same thoughts in their faces. The irony was perfect and terrible. The species that had called humans monsters now needed monsters to survive. Jake walked to the communication station and activated the long-range transmitter. He composed a single message to Earth High Command. His words were simple, but carried the weight of history. "Council requests military aid against galactic threat called Devourers. Traditional tactics have failed completely. They specifically want human forces and weapons. They want monsters. We have plenty to spare." Jake sent the message and then turned to his crew. "Set course for Earth, maximum speed. History is about to change, and we need to be there when it happens." Admiral Lisa Torres sat in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon and read Commander Morrison's message for the 5th time. Around the massive table sat the most powerful military leaders on Earth. Each person in the room understood that this moment would change everything for humanity. General Marcus Webb leaned forward in his chair. He was the head of the Terran Marine Corps and had spent 40 years studying warfare. His weathered face showed excitement mixed with grim determination. "Admiral, this is our chance. For 3 centuries we've been treated like dangerous children. Now they need exactly what makes us dangerous." Defense Secretary Patricia Hill nodded slowly. She had been working on human-alien relations for 20 years and knew how the Council really felt about Earth. "The Galactic Council has always seen US as primitive because we never stopped fighting wars. While other species evolved past violence, we kept perfecting it." Admiral Torres pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's current military capabilities. The numbers were impressive in a way that would terrify most peaceful species. Humanity had over 2 billion soldiers across all branches. They had weapons that could crack planets and destroy stars. Most importantly, they had the will to use them. Colonel Amy Rivers stood and activated another display. She ran Special Operations Command and her projects were classified beyond most security levels. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to discuss Project Nightmare." The room went quiet. Even these hardened military leaders had only heard rumors about Project Nightmare. Colonel Rivers had been developing weapons specifically designed to break enemy morale rather than simply destroy targets. "The Council species fight clean wars," Rivers explained. "They use precise energy weapons and defensive shields. They try to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure. They see war as a problem to be solved efficiently. She smiled coldly. We see war as something to be won completely. Rivers showed images of weapons that made even the generals uncomfortable. Sonic devices that triggered primal fear responses in any species with ears. Viral programs that could corrupt artificial intelligence and turn machines against their creators. Psychological warfare systems that could drive entire populations insane with terror. Dr. Stephen Clark, Earth's leading military strategist, pulled up historical data. Every species in the Council has the same weakness. They've forgotten how to think like predators. They've evolved past the instincts that kept their ancestors alive in hostile environments. Clark showed battlefield recordings from humanity's past conflicts. Soldiers charging through artillery fire. Pilots flying suicide missions against impossible odds. Infantry units fighting to the last person rather than surrendering. Other species see this as wasteful and stupid. We call it winning. Admiral Torres studied the data carefully. The Council had superior technology and energy weapons that could vaporize human ships. But technology meant nothing if you were not willing to use it properly. What are our realistic capabilities against these devourers? General Webb grinned like a predator. Admiral, we have weapons the Council has never seen. Nuclear warheads, chemical agents, biological warfare systems. They banned these weapons thousands of years ago because they considered them too cruel. He paused. We kept making them better. The holographic display showed Earth's secret weapon stockpiles. Fusion bombs that could sterilize solar systems. Engineered viruses that could adapt to any biological target. Nanomachine swarms that converted matter at the molecular level. The Peaceful Council had no defense against such weapons because they had never imagined anyone would build them. Colonel Rivers activated another classified file. We've also been studying Council military doctrine for centuries. They fight like chess players, making calculated moves and preserving valuable pieces. We fight like berserkers who burn down the whole forest to kill one enemy. Dr. Clark nodded. The Devourers have probably adapted to Council tactics by now. Energy shields, coordinated fleet movements, defensive positions. They won't be ready for human unpredictability. Admiral Torres thought about the implications. Humanity would finally have their chance to prove themselves to the galaxy, but success would come at a terrible price. They would have to show the Council exactly how monstrous humans could be when necessary. What about casualties? She asked. General Webb answered without hesitation. We plan for 30% losses minimum. Maybe 50% on some missions? The Council thinks those numbers are insane because they value individual lives over victory. His expression hardened. We understand that sometimes you have to lose the battle to win the war. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the weight of that statement. Human military doctrine accepted losses that would horrify peaceful species. They planned for scenarios where entire fleets would be sacrificed to achieve tactical advantages. Captain Derek Phillips joined the meeting via secure video link from the lunar shipyards. He commanded the construction of humanity's newest warships. Admiral Torres, we can have the first expeditionary fleet ready in 2 weeks. 500 ships including our newest dreadnoughts and carrier groups. Admiral Torres knew that 500 ships was a tiny force compared to Council fleets that numbered in the millions. But human ships were built differently. Where Council vessels focused on shields and energy weapons, human ships carried kinetic weapons, missile systems, and armor designed to ram enemy vessels if necessary. Who do you recommend to command the fleet? Torres asked. General Webb did. Not hesitate. Admiral Jack Coleman. He's been studying alien warfare for 20 years and he understands how to fight dirty when necessary. He also knows how to work with alien allies without scaring them too much. Colonel Rivers pulled up personnel files. We'll need ground forces too. I recommend putting together units from different branches. Marines for assault operations, Army for occupation duties, Special Forces for infiltration missions. The display showed soldiers like Sergeant Kelly Davis and Corporal Ryan Murphy. These were veterans of Earth's recent conflicts and understood warfare in ways that peaceful aliens could not comprehend. They had trained for urban combat, chemical warfare, and fighting in hostile environments. Dr. Clark raised an important point. We need to remember that we'll be fighting alongside Council forces. They're going to see our methods and be horrified. We need commanders who can handle diplomatic pressure while still doing what needs to be done. Admiral Torres made her decision. We deploy the expeditionary fleet under Admiral Coleman. Full authorization to use any weapons necessary, including classified systems. The mission priority is stopping the Devourers by any means required. She looked around the room at the assembled leaders. Gentlemen and ladies, the galaxy is about to learn why they were right to fear us. We are going to save them using methods that will give them nightmares for generations. General Webb stood and saluted. The galaxy cried for help, Admiral. Time to show them what monsters look like when they fight for something worth protecting. Within hours, orders went out across Earth's military networks. Soldiers reported to bases, ships prepared for departure, and weapons that had been stored in secret vaults were loaded onto transport vessels. Humanity was going to war, and the galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valdris system, and Admiral Jack Coleman felt his breath catch in his throat. Before them stretched the largest military gathering in galactic history. Thousands of alien warships filled the space around the massive Council defense station. These vessels represented every major species in the galaxy, all united against the Devourer threat. Coleman stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Retribution, and studied the alien formations through the viewing screen. The ships were beautiful in a way that human vessels could never match. Crystalline cruisers that looked like floating diamonds. Quantum destroyers that seemed to bend light around their hulls. Organic vessels that moved like living creatures through space. Admiral, said Captain Nina Foster, his tactical advisor, we're receiving docking instructions from the Council station. Speaker Veltar wants to meet with you immediately. Coleman nodded and straightened his uniform. This would be his first face-to-face meeting with the galactic leadership. For centuries, humans had only communicated with the Council through long-range messages and trade negotiations. Now he was about to sit at the same table as beings who commanded stellar empires. The docking process took 2 hours, because human ships were built so differently from Council vessels. The UES Retribution was all angles and armor plating designed to absorb damage and keep fighting. The alien docking bays were made for sleek ships that relied on shields and speed rather than heavy protection. Coleman walked through the Council station and marveled at the architecture. The corridors were wide and filled with soft light. Art from 1,000 worlds decorated the walls. Everything was designed to promote peace and harmony. It was the exact opposite of human military facilities with their narrow passages and defensive positions. Speaker Veltar waited for him in the command center along with the other military leaders. Coleman recognized them from intelligence files, but seeing them in person was still shocking. These beings represented civilizations that were ancient when humanity first discovered fire. General Crix of the Mandorian warrior clan stood nearly 3 meters tall and was covered in natural armor plating. His people were the closest thing. The Council had to professional soldiers, but even they had not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Admiral Seshra of the Quantum Fleet appeared as a shifting pattern of energy contained within a crystalline shell. Her species existed partially outside normal spacetime and could manipulate reality at the quantum level. They considered physical warfare to be primitive and inefficient. The most unsettling presence was Hive Mind Node 7 of the Synthetic Collective. It looked like a human-shaped machine, but contained the collective consciousness of billions of artificial beings. They processed information at speeds that organic minds could not comprehend. Speaker Veltar gestured for Coleman to take a seat at the conference table. Admiral Coleman, we are grateful that humanity has answered our call for aid. However, we must discuss tactical coordination between our forces. Coleman activated his holographic display and showed the human battle plan. The alien commanders studied the tactical information with growing alarm. Where their plans showed defensive positions and coordinated fleet movements, The human strategy called for aggressive strikes deep into enemy territory. "Admiral," said General Crix, "your casualty projections show 30% losses in the first engagement. This is unacceptable. We cannot sacrifice so many valuable ships and personnel." Captain Foster stepped forward and explained the human tactical doctrine. "General, our analysis shows that the Devourers adapt quickly to defensive strategies. The only way to defeat them is through unpredictable offensive actions that prevent them from learning our patterns." Admiral Seshra's energy form flickered. "With disapproval, your weapon systems are extremely crude. Nuclear warheads and kinetic projectiles cause massive collateral damage. They will contaminate entire star systems and make them uninhabitable." Coleman felt a flash of anger but kept his voice calm. "Admiral, respectfully, your advanced weapons have failed to stop the Devourers. Our crude methods might be more effective, precisely because they are unpredictable." Node 7 spoke in a mechanical voice that seemed to come from multiple speakers. "Human tactical methods show 67% probability of success, but create unacceptable long-term environmental damage. This strategy violates 43 different council regulations regarding warfare conduct." The meeting was interrupted by alarms throughout the station. Council sensors had detected a Devourer scout fleet approaching the system perimeter. This would be the first joint engagement between human and council forces. The alien commanders rushed to the tactical displays and began coordinating their traditional response. Energy barriers activated around key positions. Fleet formations moved into defensive patterns. Long-range sensors tracked the approaching enemy vessels. Coleman watched the Devourer ships on the tactical screen and felt a chill run down his spine. These were not normal spacecraft. They looked like a fusion of metal and flesh, constantly shifting and adapting as they moved through space. No two vessels were exactly alike, as if they were evolving in real time. The first exchange of fire began as the Devourers entered weapons range. Council energy beams struck the enemy ships and seemed to cause damage, but the hulls quickly adapted and became resistant to further attacks. The Devourer return fire was unlike anything Coleman had ever seen, seeming to corrupt matter at the molecular level. "They're learning," Captain Foster observed. "Every time the Council hits them with an energy weapon, they adapt to that frequency. They're making themselves immune to the next attack." The Council forces began taking heavy casualties as their weapons became less and less effective. The beautiful crystalline cruisers cracked and shattered under Devourer fire. Quantum destroyers simply disappeared as their reality-bending technology was turned against them. General Crix turned to Coleman with desperation in his eyes. "Admiral, we need your forces to join the battle now. Our traditional tactics are failing." Coleman activated the fleet communication system. "All human ships, this is Admiral Coleman. Execute attack pattern Delta. I repeat, execute attack pattern Delta." The human fleet moved forward in a formation that horrified the alien observers. Instead of maintaining defensive positions, the human ships accelerated directly toward the Devourer fleet. They were not trying to preserve themselves but to get close enough for maximum damage. Captain Derek Phillips commanded the destroyer UES Havoc and led the first wave of attacks. His ship carried experimental weapons that the Council had banned centuries ago. Nuclear torpedoes that could irradiate space for light years. Kinetic projectiles moving at near-light speed. Chemical warheads designed to poison enemy. Life support systems. The Havoc opened fire at point-blank range and Coleman watched the results with grim satisfaction. The Devourers had adapted to energy weapons, but they had no defense against crude kinetic projectiles. Nuclear explosions tore through their adaptive hulls faster than they could evolve resistance, but the real shock came when Phillips made his final decision. The Havoc was taking critical damage and would not survive much longer. Instead of retreating, Phillips aimed his ship directly at the largest Devourer vessel and activated the antimatter self-destruct system. The explosion lit up the entire star system. The Havoc and the Devourer command ship vanished in a flash of pure energy that left an expanding sphere of radioactive plasma. The blast took out half the enemy fleet and contaminated the local space with enough radiation to kill any unprotected life. The alien commanders stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. They had just witnessed a human captain deliberately destroy his own ship to take out the enemy. This was a level of tactical sacrifice that their civilized minds could barely comprehend. Lieutenant Sarah Mills coordinated the follow-up nuclear strikes from her position aboard the UES Defiance. Her targeting computer identified weak points in the remaining Devourer ships and launched a barrage of fusion warheads. The space around the enemy fleet became a hellish nightmare of radiation and plasma. The surviving Devourer vessels tried to retreat but found their escape routes blocked by human cruisers firing chemical weapons that poisoned their biomechanical systems. Within an hour, the entire enemy scout fleet was destroyed. Coleman turned to the alien commanders and saw a mixture of awe and horror in their faces. The human tactics had worked perfectly, but the cost was something that peaceful species found difficult to accept. Admiral Coleman, Speaker Veltar said quietly, your methods are effective but terrifying. You have saved us today, but at what cost to your own people and to the galaxy itself? Coleman looked at the tactical display showing the contaminated battlefield. Speaker, sometimes the only way to kill monsters is to become something even more monstrous. That's what you called us here to do. Major Chris Anderson crouched behind the rubble of what had once been a beautiful crystal spire and checked his ammunition count. The planet Zarian Prime had been one of the most peaceful worlds in the galaxy before the Devourers arrived. Now, it was a hellscape of twisted metal and corrupted organic matter that defied every natural law. Anderson's Marines had been fighting on the planet's surface 6 days, using tactics that made the Council observers sick with horror. The human soldiers carried weapons that other species had banned as war crimes. Flamethrowers that turned living creatures into ash, chemical sprayers that dissolved Devourer bioarmor, sonic weapons that drove enemy drones into self-destructive. Madness, sir, called Sergeant Tony Garcia from across the ruined plaza. We've got movement in the processing center. Looks like a Devourer command node. Anderson studied the target through his tactical scope. The processing center had once been a hospital where alien doctors healed the sick and injured. Now it was a nightmarish factory where Devourers converted captured civilians into more of their kind. The screams of the victims could be heard even through the building's twisted walls. The Council military advisors wanted to attempt a rescue mission using precise energy weapons and protective shields. They hoped to save the civilians while minimizing structural damage to the city. Anderson knew that such tactics would fail completely against an enemy that adapted to every attack. Garcia, prep the chemical charges, Anderson ordered. We're going to poison the entire building. Council observer Yellenth, a gentle being from the Pacifist Alliance, grabbed Anderson's arm with her tentacle-like appendage. Major, there are innocent civilians in that structure. Your chemical weapons will kill them along with the Devourers. Anderson looked at the alien with cold eyes. Observer, those civilians are already dead. The Devourers are using their bodies as raw material. The kindest thing we can do is end their suffering quickly. Yellenth's skin changed to deep purple, which Anderson knew indicated extreme distress in her species. This is monstrous. There must be a more humane solution. Before Anderson could respond, the building exploded outward as a massive Devourer. Construct burst through the walls. This was no ordinary enemy soldier, but a fusion of dozens of converted civilians into a single horrific creature. It stood 30 meters tall and had weapons growing directly from its flesh. The Council observers screamed in terror and fled toward the evacuation shuttles. They had never seen anything so horrifying in their entire lives. The Devourers had taken the most peaceful species in the galaxy and turned them into weapons of destruction. Anderson activated his communication system. All units execute Protocol Nightmare. I repeat, execute Protocol Nightmare. The human soldiers moved with practiced efficiency that terrified their alien allies. They had trained for exactly this scenario in facilities that the Council would have considered torture chambers. Instead of trying to preserve civilian lives, They focused on complete destruction of enemy assets. Corporal Lisa White activated the sonic warfare system that Dr. Rachel Clark had designed back on Earth. The device broadcast sounds at frequencies that triggered primal fear responses in most organic species. The massive devourer construct began thrashing wildly as its hijacked nervous systems overloaded with terror. Private Don Brooks launched incendiary rockets that set the entire processing center ablaze. The fire spread through the building's organic components, burning away the devour corruption and ending the suffering of the converted civilians inside. The battle lasted 4 hours and left the entire city uninhabitable. Human chemical weapons had poisoned the water supply. Radiation from tactical nuclear devices made the air toxic to most life forms. The beautiful crystal architecture was reduced to radioactive slag, but the planet was saved. The devourer infestation was completely eliminated with no possibility of regeneration or adaptation. Anderson's Marines had achieved total victory using methods that would give the Council nightmares for generations. Dr. Rachel Clark arrived on the next transport ship to serve as humanity's new liaison to the Council. She was a brilliant scientist and diplomat who understood both human psychology and alien sensibilities. Her job was to explain humanity's methods to increasingly horrified Council members. Dr. Clark, said Council Ethics Advisor Morthen during their first meeting, we must discuss the human approach to warfare. Your soldiers are using weapons that we classified as crimes against sapient life thousands of years ago. Dr. Clark activated a holographic display showing casualty reports from across the galaxy. Advisor Morthen, human methods have saved 12 worlds in the past month. Traditional Council tactics saved 0 worlds in the same period. The numbers were impossible to argue with. Human forces were achieving victory after victory against the Devourers while Council armies continued to suffer devastating defeats. But each human success came at a cost that peaceful species found morally unacceptable. Morthen's feathers ruffled in distress. Dr. Clark, your people are creating long-term ecological disasters. The worlds you save will be uninhabitable for centuries. Is victory worth such a price? Advisor, Dr. Clark replied coldly, the worlds we save still exist. The worlds the Devourers take are gone forever, converted into more enemy forces. I think the survivors prefer centuries of rebuilding to eternal non-existence. The tension between human and Council forces reached a breaking point when Admiral Coleman received intelligence about the Devourer homeworld. Deep space reconnaissance had located the source of the invasion, a massive artificial construct at the galaxy's center that dwarfed most solar systems. The construct was larger than anything ever built by organic life. It contained the collective consciousness of trillions of Devourer entities and served as the command center for their galactic conquest. Traditional tactics would require a million-ship armada and centuries of siege warfare to have any hope of success. Coleman called a meeting with his senior staff aboard the UES Retribution. Captain Mike Reynolds, his intelligence officer, presented the reconnaissance data with grim efficiency. Admiral, the construct is heavily defended by adaptive shielding and self-repairing weapon systems. Any direct assault would face impossible odds. Chief Scientist Lavra White had been working on classified projects that made even hardened soldiers uncomfortable. Admiral, I have a proposal that might work. We call it Operation Broken Mirror. White activated a secure holographic display that showed her latest creation. It was a quantum virus designed to infiltrate the Devourer collective consciousness and turn their hive mind against itself. The weapon would corrupt their coordination systems and cause them to attack their own forces. The virus would need to be delivered directly to the construct's core, White explained. This would require a single ship to penetrate the heaviest defenses in the galaxy. The crew would have no possibility of survival. Commander Ben Carter, Navigator Lisa Murphy, and Engineer Don Brooks immediately volunteered for the suicide mission. They understood that someone had to carry the virus to its target, and they were willing to die to save the galaxy. Coleman felt the weight of command as he studied the mission parameters. Operation Broken Mirror violated every council regulation about warfare and would be considered an act of genocide by most civilized species. But it was also humanity's best chance to end the war quickly. The final meeting with the council leadership was held in the station's main conference chamber. Speaker Veltar and the other commanders listened to Coleman's proposal with growing horror. The quantum virus would not just defeat the Devourers, but would cause them to destroy themselves in the most brutal way possible. Admiral Coleman, Speaker, Veltar said with disgust, this weapon is designed specifically to cause maximum psychological trauma. You are asking us to authorize the torture of an entire species on a galactic scale. General Crix, despite being from a warrior culture, agreed with the Speaker. Admiral, there must be limits to what we will do for victory. If we use such methods, how are we different from the Devourers themselves? Coleman stood and faced the assembled alien leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, you called us here because your civilized methods failed. You asked for monsters to fight monsters. This is what monsters do when the survival of everything depends on victory. The vote was close, but the council ultimately refused to authorize Operation Broken Mirror. They called it genocidal and monstrous, saying that victory achieved through such means would be morally worthless. Coleman made the hardest decision of his military career. He activated his personal communication system and sent a coded message to Earth High Command. Request permission to proceed without council authorization. Operation Broken Mirror is our only viable option for total victory. The response came. Back within hours. Permission granted. Do what must be done. Coleman turned to his crew and saw the same grim determination in their faces. Prepare the UES Defiance for immediate departure. We launch in 6 hours with or without council approval. As the human ship prepared for its final mission, Coleman reflected on humanity's role in the galaxy. They had been called monsters, and now they were proving that label correct. But sometimes monsters were exactly what the universe needed to survive. Captain Eric Stone watched the Devourer homeworld grow larger on his viewing screen and tried not to think about the fact that he would be dead within the hour. The UES Defiance was approaching the massive construct at maximum speed, carrying the quantum virus that could end the war forever. Stone's crew had volunteered for this suicide mission knowing they would never return home. Navigator Kevin Davis plotted their course through the construct's defenses while Engineer Patricia Mills kept the ship's systems running despite constant enemy fire. Communications Officer Ryan Clark maintained contact with the human fleet, sending back tactical data until the very end. The construct was unlike anything in human experience. It stretched across space for millions of kilometers, a nightmare fusion of metal and flesh that pulsed with alien life. Billions of Devourer entities moved through its corridors, their collective consciousness focused on consuming the galaxy piece by piece. Captain, reported Davis from his navigation station, we're encountering increasing resistance as we approach the core. The Devourers are throwing everything they have at us. Stone nodded grimly. The enemy knew what the Defiance carried, and they were desperate to stop it. Biomechanical fighters swarmed around the human ship like angry insects. Living weapons fired corrupted energy that ate through the ship's armor plating. Back at the Council Defense Station, Admiral Coleman watched the battle through long-range sensors. The alien commanders stood beside him in stunned silence as they witnessed the sacrifice of an entire human crew for the sake of galactic survival. Speaker Veltar gripped the railing with her delicate hands. Admiral Coleman, your people are dying for a galaxy that has treated them as outcasts for centuries. Why do they make such sacrifices? Coleman kept his eyes on the tactical display. Speaker, humans understand something that your peaceful species have forgotten. Sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become something terrible. The Defiance pushed deeper into the construct's defenses, taking damage that would have destroyed most ships 10 times over. Captain Stone ordered all non-essential systems shut down to maintain power for the shields and weapons. The crew worked in darkness, breathing recycled air and fighting through injuries that would kill most aliens. Captain, called Engineer Mills from her station, Hull breach on decks 4 through 7. We're losing atmosphere fast. Stone sealed off the damaged sections without hesitation, trapping several crew members in areas that would soon become vacuum. This was the kind of tactical decision that horrified Council observers, but was standard procedure for human military operations. Dr. Kevin Davis, the mission science officer, monitored the quantum virus as they approached the deployment zone. The weapon was housed in a specially shielded container that protected it from the construct's defensive systems. Once released, it would spread through the Devour collective consciousness faster than they could adapt. 2 minutes to target, Captain, Davis reported. Virus deployment systems are ready. The final approach was the most dangerous part of the mission. The construct's core was protected by weapons that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They fired beams of pure entropy that aged matter into dust in seconds. Gravity manipulators tried to crush the Defiance into a singularity, Captain. Stone felt the ship shuddering as its structure began to fail under the impossible stresses. Emergency lights flickered and the air filled with smoke from overloaded systems. But they were so close now that he could see the construct's central consciousness chamber through the viewing screen. "Deploy the virus," Stone ordered. "All hands, it's been an honor serving with you." Dr. Davis activated the deployment system and the quantum virus launched toward its target. The weapon was invisible to normal sensors, but Stone knew it had found its mark when the construct's defensive fire suddenly became erratic and uncoordinated. The virus spread through the Devourer collective consciousness like wildfire through dry grass. Their hive mind, which had coordinated the conquest of countless worlds, suddenly turned into a maze of conflicting imperatives and self-destructive commands across the galaxy. Devourer fleets that had been advancing on Council worlds suddenly stopped and began attacking each other. Their perfect coordination dissolved into chaos as the virus corrupted their shared thoughts and turned their own minds against them. On the defense station, the alien commanders watched in amazement as their sensors detected Devourer forces withdrawing from conquered systems. The ancient enemy that had seemed unstoppable was tearing itself apart from within. "It's working," whispered General Crix. "A human weapon is actually working, but the victory came at a terrible cost." The used Defiance had taken too much damage during its final approach and was breaking apart under the construct's gravitational forces. Captain Stone and his crew died as heroes, but they died knowing they had saved the galaxy. Speaker Veltar turned to Admiral Coleman with tears in her large eyes. "Admiral, your people have achieved the impossible. The Devourers are destroying themselves. But I must ask, was this victory worth becoming the monsters we feared?" Coleman watched the tactical displays showing Devourer fleets across the galaxy, consuming each other in fits of artificial madness. "Speaker, you asked for monsters to fight monsters. We delivered exactly what you needed, even if you didn't want to admit it." The war's final phase lasted only days. Without their collective consciousness to coordinate attacks, the remaining Devourer forces became easy targets for combined human and Council fleets. Sergeant Tony Garcia led ground forces that hunted down the last survivors using tactics so brutal that the enemy fled rather than face them. The galaxy was saved, but the cost was higher than anyone had imagined. Dozens of star systems were contaminated by human chemical weapons and would remain uninhabitable for centuries. The beautiful worlds that Council forces had tried to preserve were reduced to radioactive wastelands. More importantly, the Council had learned exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed to extremes. They had asked for help and received salvation, but the methods used to achieve victory would haunt their dreams for generations. 3 months after the war's end, Commander Jake Morrison received new orders aboard the Earth's Edge. Humanity had been offered full membership in the Galactic Council, along with a permanent role as the galaxy's military enforcement arm. The arrangement was simple and terrifying. The Council species would handle diplomacy, trade, scientific research, and all the peaceful activities that kept galactic civilization running. But when monsters needed to be fought, when impossible odds demanded impossible sacrifices, The galaxy would call on humanity. Morrison read the orders carefully and understood what they really meant. Humans were no longer the quarantined primitives at the galaxy's edge. They had become something far more important and far more feared. The Guardians who kept worse nightmares at bay. Dr. Helen Pierce joined Morrison on the bridge as they prepared for their next mission. Commander, the Council is sending us to investigate reports of aggressive machine intelligences in the Outer Rim. They want us to evaluate whether military action is necessary. Morrison smiled grimly. Dr. Pierce, it sounds like the galaxy has another monster problem? Good thing they know who to call? As the Earth's Edge jumped to hyperspace, Morrison reflected on humanity's new position in the galactic order. They were the monsters in the dark, the nightmare that civilized species whispered about in their safe homes. They were feared and respected and absolutely necessary. The galaxy had cried for help and humans had sent the monsters. Everyone lived to regret asking for such aid, except for those who lived because they had received it. And in a universe full of horrors that defied imagination, sometimes monsters were exactly what the universe needed to survive. The war was over, but humanity's real work was just beginning. They had proven they could save the galaxy by becoming something terrible. Now they had to live with being the creatures that peaceful species called when their worst nightmares became real. Morrison settled into his command chair and prepared for whatever horrors awaited them in the darkness between the stars. The galaxy was safe for now, but safety was a temporary thing in a universe where monsters were always lurking just beyond the light.